Hello and welcome back to HandBound TCG. On this episode of Creating a TCG, I'm going to walk through the very beginning steps I took when building this game. The foundational decisions that shaped the game, along with some that still need to be fleshed out. So let's jump right in. The first thing I really did to make this game was create a few creature cards. Mostly because I had some cool creatures I wanted to make. Originally, to keep the game simple, creatures only had two things, a cost and a power stat. That was really it. After making about 5 or so cards, I realized that was actually way too simple. I wanted a creature that was a pretty basic creature that just kinda had a higher defense. In order to do that, I needed an ability that increased its power when it was attacked, and then the power would go back down afterwards. I quickly realized that if I wanted a creature with essentially just high defense, I had to create some weird workaround ability to make it work. So in order to create more simplicity, I actually added a bit of complexity in a second stat, defense, and then I changed power to attack. After that, I actually started thinking more about how I wanted the game to work, and that started with how creatures would actually interact in battle. In games like Magic the Gathering, there's a blocking step. The attacking player declares attackers, and then the defending player chooses how to block. That works really well in Magic, but I didn't really want that for HandBound. I wanted the attacking player to have the advantage and to make all the decisions on their turn, more similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! So I designed combat so that the attacking player declares an attacker and a target for that attacker. At this point, I also knew I wanted spells, and more importantly for battle, at-will spells. I previously called these instants, which is similar to Magic's instant speed spells. These are spells that are not limited to being played during a main phase, and can be played during your opponent's attack phase. That way, the defending player still has meaningful interaction during combat. So here's how combat works. The active player, during their attacking phase, declares an attack with a creature and chooses a target creature. Both creatures will swing at each other at the same time. The attacker's attack is compared to the defender's defense. If it's equal to or greater, the defender dies. At the same time, the defender's attack is compared to the attacker's defense. If it is equal or greater, the attacker dies. This happens at the same time, and after this step is taken, the battle resolves. There is no persistent damage. It's clean and it's simple. Then came the question of multi-attacking. I wanted strength in numbers to still matter. If you have a bunch of 1/1s, you should be able to take on a larger creature. So what would happen if 3 creatures attack 1? I had a decision to make, and I decided to make it so that the attacking creatures with the same target add all of their attack values together to attack a defending creature. If their total attack is greater than or equal to the defender's defense, the defender dies. Now, how does the defender retaliate? Can he only hit one attacker? That seemed a little weak. So the current idea is that the defending creature will swing back at each attacking creature individually, using its full attack stat. That means you can take down a vastly powerful 10/10 creature with 10 tiny 1/1 creatures, but every single one of them will die in the process. This is a risk and reward process that does slightly favor the defensive side. For the many small creatures on attack, they will all die in the process. For the big creature's attack, the big creature can really only attack one creature per turn. This made logical sense to me and is how combat works to this day. Now, the whole point of the game is to attack your opponent and force them to discard cards, hopefully enough to make them discard more cards than they have and make them lose. So how do we do this? If someone attacks the other player directly, then the player would discard cards equal to the combined attack of the creatures attacking the player. And if this is more than the amount of cards in their hand, they discard to 0 and lose. Now, how do you attack your opponent directly? At first, it seems simple. You can't attack the other player while they have creatures on the field, so you have to clear their creatures first, then attack your opponent's hand. But originally, I had all battles resolving simultaneously, and that created a problem. If everything resolves at once, you could never clear the field and then attack the opponent in the same turn. You would basically have to wait for your opponent to not be able to play any defensive creatures on their turn, and that felt very limiting. So I changed combat to resolve one battle at a time. Now, if you clear your opponent's field during your attack phase, you can use your remaining creatures to attack their hand directly. This adds some battle tricks and knowledge in knowing how many creatures you should really commit to the early attacks and how many you should save for a potential attack on the player. This opened up the game in a big way, perhaps too big. A big issue that I haven't really tackled yet deals with the players taking damage. I need to do more playtesting to figure out if I like how the game currently plays or not. Basically, when a player takes direct damage, it will result in a snowball effect. As you take damage, you will fall behind your opponent, and you're only ever going to get further behind, realistically. At this point, I'm not sure how to mitigate this. HandBound at this moment does not really have a comeback mechanic, which every good game should have. It's no fun to play a game and by turn 3 of every match you can tell who is going to win 8 turns later. At that point, you might as well limit the game to 3 turns. This is something that has really bothered me with HandBound and is not something I have a good solution for. I have put some thought into this, however. Maybe you draw half the amount of cards you discarded as damage during your next draw phase. Well, that would help, but that would only really slow down the snowball effect, not stop it. And if I ever try to make some kind of comeback mechanic attached to taking damage, like drawing back all of the cards you just discarded or even more, then there would be no reason to deal damage to the opponent unless you can guarantee a kill. And I really don't want to limit the player's decision making this way. There should be some good coming from damaging your opponent. On top of all this, I am pretty sure that the optimal way to play the game would be to play as many cards as you possibly can during your turn to get out as many buffer creatures onto the field to protect your limited hand of likely 1 or 2 remaining cards. Maybe you would save onto an at-will card or 2 to disrupt your opponent's cards, but if you ever don't have enough buffer creatures, well, you're kinda screwed, no matter how many cards are in your hand. But maybe this is actually a good thing that solves my biggest issue. If any direct attack on an opponent is going to essentially be a kill shot, then do I really have to care about making some kind of comeback mechanic related to taking damage? Maybe I should let the game end, and essentially have it be a race to see who can damage the opponent first. I wouldn't actually end the game there, at the first point of damage, but I can design it in a way that promotes dumping your hand onto the field each turn and hoping it's enough to A, threaten your opponent, and B, save yourself from any retaliation. And all of the comeback mechanic stuff can really just go down to the classic TCG deck building and hoping for the right card at the right moment that could either clear the board or give you a big boss creature that could really turn the tables. A lot of this will be explored in the near future with playtesting, and there's plenty of different comeback mechanic ideas I have now or can have in the future that'll be tested. I do really like a good comeback mechanic though. Check out Chaos Galaxy TCG's most recent TCG, Evolvers, for a very cool comeback mechanic that is at the very center of his game, and I have to admit I'm a little jealous about that. But I'm not really sure if HandBound at this moment can reasonably fit a comeback mechanic into its gameplay, other than simply through card effects. Again, playtesting will be essential to truly see if I enjoy the game this way, or if I need to tweak it. Next, I started thinking about the draw phase. Most card games have you draw 1 card at the beginning of your turn, but in HandBound, your hand is everything. So I knew that drawing 1 card probably wouldn't be enough. Very early on, I decided the draw phase should be 2 cards instead of 1. This should help a little bit with having a dead hand and other small hand-related problems. In addition to getting cards into your hand, I had some big questions about how the cost system will really work. To play a card in HandBound, you discard cards from your hand to pay the cost of that card. That means you're discarding cards that you chose to put into your deck to play just to pay for other cards. At first, I thought I'd maybe solve this by making tons of cards that just give bonuses when discarded to pay for other cards. Maybe they'd count as 2 cards. Maybe they'd shuffle back into your deck. Something like that. But that would require a ton of cards, likely half the cards in your deck, to have that specific kind of ability just to make the cost system feel right. So instead, I solved this by coming up with something I called non-playable cards. These are simply just cards that say non-playable. You can't play them, hence the name. However, these cards still count as normal cards in your hand. You can use them to play other cards. They basically just exist to be discarded. So now, when you need to pay a cost, you're not discarding the card you were excited to play, you're discarding your non-playable cards. And I can even still make cards that give good effects when discarded. Of course, this introduces another problem. If you are familiar with TCGs, you might be familiar with the terms Mana Screw and Mana Flood. Mana Screw is when you don't have enough resource cards to pay for the cards in your hand, locking you out from playing the game. Mana Flood is the opposite, where all you have is resource cards and nothing to play with them, once again locking you out from playing. Many TCGs have many different ways to solve these issues. HandBound solves Mana Screw naturally because you can discard any card in your hand to pay a cost. The real issue becomes having too many non-playable cards and not enough playable ones. Drawing 2 cards per turn might help mitigate that a little bit, but I've also considered another idea that I haven't fully implemented yet. And that idea is having 2 decks. One deck would be your normal playable cards, and the other would be your non-playable cards. At the start of your turn, you would choose. You would either draw 2 non-playable cards, or you would draw 1 playable card. If you have a powerful card ready to go, you would draw 2 non-playable cards to pay for it. If your hand is full of non-playable cards, you would draw from your playable deck and hope for a good card that you could play. This gives the player more control over escaping Flood or Screw. It's still something I'm experimenting with, so let me know your thoughts. Part of this game is to minimalize complex rules. Do you think that having multiple decks would be too complex? My honest thoughts are this. Having 2 decks would add complexity to the game that I do not like. However, I do believe that having 2 decks would actually improve the gameplay experience, which is really what matters at the end of the day. I will definitely need to play test both options and get feedback from playtesters on this decision. Please leave your thoughts on this in the comments. I have also briefly considered allowing players to sacrifice creatures already on the field to help pay costs, but that's more of an early idea that would need additional testing. But this could definitely help get a bigger, more expensive creature out onto the field, and is kind of a way to store mana. However, a problem with this is that token creature generation could easily become overpowered, as they would essentially just be generating mana each turn. I could put a limit on that in the rules by saying only non-token creatures could be sacrificed for card cost, but again, this is just adding complexity to the game that I do not want. So these are a bunch of early decisions that needed to be made, or still need to be made, in order to make HandBound work as a game. There are still some smaller issues that I will bring up in the future, and I'm sure many more will pop up in the coming months of game creation. I am very excited to talk about some of the next topics, including my rarity system, my type system, which I'm very happy with, showing off cards that have been made previously, and the ones I'm going to actually make into my starting sets, and then even my rulebook. Yeah, I am excited over a rulebook. Oh, how creating a TCG has changed me. If you have enjoyed this episode and are looking forward to more videos, then please like and subscribe to begin growing the HandBound TCG community. And if you have any suggestions over the many difficult decisions I have made or are currently trying to make, then please comment below. I'm very interested to hear some ideas. That being said, thank you, have a great day, and stay tuned for more HandBound.